Security. Security is really important when you're looking at any solution, particularly a solution that's of the cloud nature, and that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk through a number of things in this category, and just to give you an idea, we're going to spend time talking about what the reason why you care about this is, what the cost of failed security, what the likelihood of it happening, what the impact it can be, specifically on security in the cloud. Then we're going to look at ways to actually achieve effective security. We're going to talk about how you can accomplish having good security for your solution. Then we'll talk about what to look for to find that. We'll talk a little bit about certifications if they're important to you, and finish up with any questions. There's a chat option in the lower left corner of your web window there. You can use that any time to enter your questions, and we'll go through them at the end and make sure that we cover everyone's questions. So let's get started. Let's talk about why this topic is important in the first place. What does it matter? What's the cost that we're looking at? What kind of impact can this have? Well, according to IBM Security, the average data breach to a company costs about $4 million. So that's a real good reason to be worried about this. And in fact, here in the United States, it's even worse because the average cost in the US is over $8 million. Well, what in the world is all that cost? What's coming from that? So the answer to that, let's take a look at an example. So this is our friend Mike. Mike runs an international shipping business. And Mike is just having the worst morning ever because he's on a series of phone calls just finding out that his business has gotten hacked. And first, his CIO calls in and is telling Mike, hey, look, we've just had a hack. It happens to be the industry average size of 25,000 customer records were compromised in this hack. And immediately he and the CIO are talking about all the things they're going to have to do and how much it costs because they're going to have to notify all those people. They're going to have to do an analysis to figure out how they were breached. They're going to have to do remedial action to fix it. So there's already a whole host of unexpected bills toggling up in Mike's mind, and he's really, really having a bad day already. But then Mike has a call with his attorney, and his attorney said, look, every single one of our customers is likely to sue us over this. They've all been compromised by our breach. And that's probably going to cost us around $4 million, Mike. That's the average cost for a business in one of these to have to deal with all of the lawsuits and legal issues. But Mike's not done yet. His CFO calls and says, hey, Mike, one of my concerns is that we're operating in the EU, and so we're subject to EU regulations, and they have fines that can be charged for this that could be up to 4% of our revenue. And now Mike's day is getting really bad. And then, just to top it all off, he talks to a sales director. He says, yeah, Mike, I understand. We're losing a lot of money. There's stuff we've got to fix. We could get sued. There could be fines. But have you thought about the impact to our brand reputation going forward? We could lose business over this. And in fact, the average is around 2% of future business based upon the negative impact that occurs to your company's reputation. So Mike's having a really, really bad day. There's a lot of real costs associated with all of this. The impact can be huge, and this is why we should spend some time talking about how you can deal with security concerns. Now, one of those immediate things people can say of, hey, look, I've got this taken care of. I've already solved it. One of the things I could go out there and get what's called cyber insurance. This is just another insurance policy or a rider on an existing liability policy that will provide you insurance. But the problem is this is not going to necessarily solve all of your issues. There's 5 reasons for that. First, cyber insurance doesn't cover everything that you might think. The very first one is that it can only cover attacks and intrusions. In other words, when somebody proactively goes out and causes the problem. Unfortunately, a large percentage of cyber attacks are human error, not somebody proactively attacking you. They can just be somebody making a configuration mistake, accidentally leaving stuff around. Just most recently in the last week, an Amazon engineer accidentally allowed hundreds of passwords and keys to not only his private personal information, but Amazon experimental and production systems. just sitting around for anybody to pick up. So this is not a case of somebody going out and trying to hack into the system. It's just somebody being dumb. And that's generally not covered under these cyber insurance policies. Another problem is there's limited time period coverage. In other words, you are only covered if you do your due diligence of informing people within a certain set amount of time. And this can be complex and difficult. The American Bar Association recently published an article all about cyber insurance. So one of the things they call out that's a difficulty is determining when your coverage actually starts. In most cases, there has to be a notification to the insurance company, and that has to happen within a set number of days. But there is a lot of confusion as to what that time period is. Another problem that people see is, are they currently current on their cyber insurance waiver, rider to the policy? Have they paid up on a current time? And a third problem the ABA notes is being able to have a policy that is covered because you've included the right experts in your notification process. So there's a lot of complexity and ins and outs. And I highly recommend this article from the ABA that really talks about all the different pieces there that can make this not a slam dunk if you actually have a problem. A third issue is limiting the types of damages that are covered. So, okay, the policy is agreed. Yes, you had an intrusion. Yes, it's covered under your policy. Yes, you notified us in the appropriate amount of time. But it may still be that the types of damages. We saw what Mike was dealing with a minute ago. And one of the problems that the Federal Reserve Bank has called out is that coverage does not cover a lot of the areas which you might think important. We saw Mike had to worry about not just such things as corrective actions, remedial actions, fines, and even lawsuits, but he also had to deal with loss of future business, loss of brand reputation, additional punitive actions. And many of these things are not covered under cyber insurance policy. So you may discover that the largest portion of that $4 to $8 million that it's going to cost you may not be covered at all. And then one of the latest problems are insurance companies getting out of their policies by declaring that a cyber attack, remember up at the top, they have to be attacks or intrusions, are not just the acts of an individual, but they are literally acts of war. A really famous case on this was the Mondelez company. Now, you may not have heard of Mondelez, but they're the people who make Oreos and Cadbury. So I think you've probably eaten their products, if nothing else. And Mondelez was attacked by the NotPetya virus, and their insurance provider out of Switzerland said, well, wait a second, you've got $100 million in losses. But that was another state actor trying to attempt governmental espionage, and you got hit by the fallout of it. So they used their act of war clause to say, we're not going to cover the damages in your cyber insurance policy. So there's a whole other problem here that even if you do have the issues, we're saying that the coverage may not cover you at all. A lot of different things to look at here. Like all insurance, it's very complicated and something to be concerned about. So this isn't the end-all be-all solution is really the message to take away here. Well, okay, lots of gloom and doom, Kevin. This is scary and everything, but how likely am I really to have to deal with this? Well, here's more of the scare tactics, unfortunately. About a quarter of all businesses will have a major security breach in the next 24 months. Will it be an actual breach, or will it may just turn out to be a threat? Depends on how good the security that you've got in place is. So think about it that's a 1 in 4 chance that your business is going to do with this. And if you're in the small and medium business space, you've got about a 60% chance of your company going out of business due to this. So the threat is very high, 25% chance, and the actual impact of the threat is huge. It could be a business-ending event. So this is a very, very important topic, something we've got to spend time and talk about. Okay, Kevin, it's all terrible. It's awful. What do we do about it? This is our favorite clip art that I call the what do we do guy. What's our answer? Well, the good news is what do we do guy has an answer for you, which is you need to ensure that all your cloud services provide adequate security measures. There are other things you can do. We could be spending a day or two in a seminar on what actions you should be taking. But this topic here today is really focusing on your cloud services, such as the ones that Vertical sells and that we can offer and help you with. what constitutes adequate security measures, though? What do you have to get? And that's the question that we've got to address in the rest of this webinar. That's what we're really going to dig down on. What is adequate security? How can you find it? How can you recognize it and know it so that you can pick the right choice? We're going to spend some time on that. So those of you who know me may know that I started out as a U.S. Army officer. I was actually an armored cavalry officer, commanded tanks and scout vehicles and all that kind of thing. And one of the things I learned in my Army days is that security is not a static thing. You don't have security if you just have an obstacle, is what we call it in the Army. Let me give you a perfect example of this. The Army has field manuals that talk about the best emplacement that the infantry can do as far as an obstacle. And it's what's called triple strand concertina wire. That's basically where you take 3 big rolls of what we call razor wire. It used to be barbed wire back in the day, but they figured, oh, it's even worse if you sit there and actually put razor blades on the stuff. It's really, really horrible. Not something fun to work with. But they come in these big rolls that are like a meter and a half wide when deployed. You put 2 of them together and you get double strand, and gives you something that's about a meter and a half tall and really more like 4 meters wide with a space between them. And then you can stick a 3rd roll on top of it and you get triple strand concertina, which is now 3 meters high, 4 meters deep, incredibly sharp. And if you do it properly, as these gentlemen are doing with poles, very hard to move and get out of the way because it's pounded into the earth with those stakes. So this sounds really impressive. But one of those lessons that I learned in the Army is that any obstacle is just an obstacle. It's at most a speed bump. I was shown by U.S. Army Rangers the fastest way to get through triple strand concertina wire, which is they took one of their squad, they put gloves and a balaclava on him so he was all covered up. Everybody put suppressing fire out there to make sure nobody was there. And if nobody was covering, nobody was observing the obstacle and defending it, he could just run up, jump on all that wire, flatten it down with the weight of his body, and the rest of his squad ran over him. And you would breach this incredibly complex obstacle that could take hours to in place in about 90 seconds. Just by running over your buddy. It's really fun to be the guy in the bottom, let me tell you. But it does the job. And the point of all of this is that security requires active effort. You've got to have people actively working to maintain and observe, as the Army field manuals say, your obstacle. If it's not, you're just basically creating a waste of time. There's no point to it. Active effort is required, and this is what we're going to focus on here. Because you can talk about all the cool security features of a product. Oh, all the data is encrypted. I've heard people talk about, is it encrypted at rest? Is it encrypted in motion? How low in the stack is it encrypted? All this stuff. But encrypted is just a static feature. In voice over IP land, where I live, in unified communications, we talk about secure RTP or SRTP. And that is the way to encrypt voice calls in real time so people can't listen in on them. You can have password management where you can enforce various ridiculous password policies. Some of them get really nuts, where you've got to change your password every 30 to 45 days, that kind of thing. By the way, changing your password constantly is actually a bad security feature. It's a different conversation. Who has access to the data centers where all this is stored? What are my security standards for moving around, making changes, updating data? What are all my policies? These are all great, but they aren't security because they're all static items. What you need to have are processes. Processes are what make security actually work. Are you doing regular software updates in reaction to problems? Do you have real-time monitoring going on to see the problems? Is somebody observing the obstacle? Do you have penetration going so somebody can go and figure out if you have problems so that you can fix it ahead of time? Do you have reviews of who's accessing and who's getting into information, who's logging in, and who's accessing the information in a data center? Do you have constant updates of your security standards and policies? Are people constantly planning, reviewing, and proactively working with it? These are the kind of things you need for security to be real. The stuff on the left is great. The stuff on the right is what makes this actually secure. Ongoing effort by people. And this is where cloud actually has a real advantage. Now, I've heard people say before, hey, look, being in the cloud means you're more vulnerable because you're always online, you're always connected, and there is truth to that. But cloud should be offered, and we all hear the term, as a service. We've got unified communications as a service. Cloud is as a service. That should mean you get ongoing security service as well. And so that's what we're now going to narrow on even further and talk about that as a service capability. So we're going to talk about security as a service. And this isn't something you buy separately. This should be baked into your cloud solution. This should be one of the reasons that you choose one cloud solution over another. You should be looking for that security as a service. So premise solutions, this is software that you buy and put on site. It's on servers that are in your data center or at your company location. Vertical sells a lot of this still today. There are real advantages, and they have a flaw. Their flaw is all they can depend on are these features over here on the left, because they don't have an as-a-service component normally. And really, even data center access restriction, that's an ongoing service. That's not something you normally have unless you provide it yourself, unless you do all these things yourselves. So all this stuff I talked about a moment ago, you can get software updates with a premise solution. And there is some questions sometimes, depending on the provider, how quickly those come. But none of these other things happen unless you get a vendor, for example, Vertical, who will come in and offer some of them. So there is a real flaw here. As long as you have that premise solution connected to the internet, it's going to suffer. And here's where cloud can be of advantage, because you're paying monthly for cloud, right? You're paying every month for this. So you should be getting as a service value. You should get recurring value. You should get people doing stuff for you. Now, let's be clear. Not all cloud services are doing this. This is the point. Here's how to find out what they should be offering and differentiating between the ones that offer these kind of security as a service capabilities and the ones that don't. So you want to look for proactive security. You want to look for active security teams working for you on a monthly basis doing stuff. What stuff? The kind of stuff we just saw. Real-time monitoring, penetration testing, software updates, access reviews. We've seen this list about 3 times now. And here's the key message for you. This isn't something that's special. This isn't something that's unique. This should be table stakes. If your vendor can't deliver this, run away fast. This is absolutely necessary in buying any cloud service. Whether it's a unified communication service, contact center, or many other services. It could just be storage in the cloud. It could be, business applications. If they're not offering these kind of security services, run away quickly. So what are these services? We've seen this high-level list, but let's get a little more detailed. We talk about having a team. This should be a dedicated security team whose only job is security. That's what they're working on. They're not, oh yeah, we've got Ed, and Ed does, network monitoring to make sure of call quality, and he responds to tickets, and oh yeah, security is his problem too. There should be a dedicated security team. They're doing real-time monitoring of the systems. They're seeing what traffic that's going on. They're looking for trends. They should have tool sets that support them in this. And they should also be monitoring threats out there. They should be constantly monitoring security vendors who are identifying new threats, news sources that are looking at new breaches that have occurred. All of this information should be coming into them, and they should be evaluating it and looking at all of the information on what new security threats are out there. They should also be planning and looking for proactive responses. Are they pushing to get software patches done by the engineering team? Are they making changes to their configuration? Are they monitoring things more closely based on the threats they see out there? Are they reacting when they see threats occurring, when they actually see something in the systems and they see trends happening? What are they doing in response? They should be proactively solving those as quickly as they happen. And they should be doing continuous planning. What's the future like? What new threats are coming out? How are we going to solve them? What are we going to change? How are we going to update our policies? Because one of the key things about all the security stuff is it's really hard to keep up. The threat is always changing. The problems are always new. This is one of the reasons why cyber insurance is not a solution, because as soon as you think you understand the game and write a policy, the threat changes and new and difficult issues occur. And it's very hard to put that into a document. So another thing you should be looking at is quick turnaround response time. You need to be looking at an organization that is proactively looking to identify those new threats and solving that problem with new software updates that are released in a matter of days, if not hours, and not months. You need to be looking at customer notification, letting you know that there's a problem, what's going on with it, and how it's being addressed. You need to be looking at real-time turnaround. That's part of what the as-a-service piece is. You should be notified as soon as it happens, and there should be an action plan to solve it. Do you need to change something? Are they changing something? Is there new software? And they also need to be actively trying to break things themselves. This is one of those weird things about the world of software and IT. But you need to go out and actually try and break things. They need to have what's called a red team, which is a group of people whose job it is to go break stuff. That could be an outsourced third party. Sometimes this can actually be better because that outsourced third party is outside the organization, doesn't have access to inside resources, but also can use new and different techniques. So these guys are looking at this, identifying vulnerabilities, trying to get in. They should always be used every time a new software patch is put in place. The red team should be saying, hey, can I exploit this? Can I get in? Can I find it? And they provide that feedback back to that dedicated security team. This penetration testing needs to be ongoing because the only way that you can really have security is to go test it yourself. Going back to my Army days, we always had the opposing force, the opposition team that we fought against, that were trying new things and coming up with new and exciting ways to hurt us. In fact, the best trained Army brigade in the world is probably the opposition force, the 11th Cavalry at the National Training Center out in Nevada, because all they do every day is go fight against the other side and try and break them. This is what penetration testing is in the cloud world. Somebody who's always trying to get into the systems, to log in as you, to break in and hack and get your information, and then providing the results of that so that we can go fix it on the back end. And then you're looking for published security docs. What kind of standards are you applying to? There are a number of documents and pieces out there. There are things called SOC 1 and SOC 2 for data centers, and many other documents that you can look at. But you want to ask and look for those kind of published security documents, not just say, oh yeah, we're highly secure, everything's great. And then you should be looking for certifications. If you're looking for specific security and regulatory certifications, you should be asking for what their continuous process and review is. In fact, that's such an important topic. Let's spend a minute on it. Let's talk about certifications. It's great to say, Mr. Cloud Vendor, do you have HIPAA certification? Are you certified for FISMA to work with the federal government? Do you have PCI DSS to lower our credit card rates? Are you ISO certified? Or many others. These are all wonderful things. But the thing to understand is they're not static. Just like security, they're constantly changing. Here's an example of the ISO standards since 1992, how they've continually evolved, changed, and revised, and new standards are being placed. So you may be ISO certified, but are you currently ISO certified? And what about the changes that are coming? This happens with all certifications, and it's necessary and important to have an ongoing process, not just for initial certification and the checkbox to say, yes, this product is HIPAA certified, but the refresh, the looking at certification changes, the updates, and making sure that you're constantly current. Just like with the security portion of it, the certifications which validate the security need to be constantly monitored. And so your vendor needs a continuous process, a team for maintaining and adding all those certifications. So those are all the pieces that you need, those 5 things. But how do you verify that a vendor actually has them? This is the last step and probably the most important part of this. If you remember nothing else, remember these sections, because this is what's going to help you choose the right cloud vendor. So first, you want to ask about their security department. Do they have one? Who leads it? What is the expertise? How many people are in it? What kind of tasks do they do? Where are they located? This detail is less about you being able to evaluate, oh, are these things good? And it's more about seeing if the vendor actually has answers. Because let me let you know a little secret. I know this is terrible, but sometimes salespeople exaggerate. I know that's shocking. They will sometimes tell you what you want to hear to make sure and make the sale. So it's up to you to dig a little more to make sure there is reality behind the nice promises. When you ask questions like this, you're beginning to look for a level of detail that mandates that there is reality behind the, yes, we have great security. It's all taken care of and we have a cool security department. Okay, who's in charge? What background do they have? How many people? These kind of questions starts making the, I have great security and I have a security team into reality. So let me give you an example. Here's Mike McAlpin. He happens to lead security at 8x8, one of the vendors that we work with. You look at this resume and you can quickly tell that this is a serious dude as far as security. He's worked with the FBI. He's worked with the American Bar Association. He's helped develop the standards for security and cyber defense that we all use and live behind today. This is a person who really knows what's going on. You start seeing this resume, you know that this is a vendor that's taking security seriously. So these are the kind of things that you want to ask for and look for. You don't have to know a lot about what's going on. It's very clear by reading this very quickly. You can tell that they're making some serious effort on this point. The next part is to see their security documentation. So what kind of standards have they adhered to? What kind of documentations have they published? Have they done external audits where people are coming in and validating their security? Are they going for standards out there in the industry? Look for the ongoing process to not just create those certifications and standards, but how are they going to do the next one? When is the next one going to happen? How soon? Who has access to all this data? Where is their data located? Where is their software put out of? And how is it secured? Ask to see all of this information, not because you're necessarily an expert, but once again, the detail begins to show you if there's a reality. It's easy to say, oh yes, we support all these standards and here's a list. You want to see the actual documents, and that will begin to convince you that these things exist. Ask about security services. What kind of things do you get? Are they monitoring your logins to make sure that somebody isn't hacking into your password and using it? Are they monitoring on a unified communication system like we sell? Are they monitoring calling activity? Are they managing usage of the software? What are they doing in a proactive response? How do they react when they see a problem? When they see trends, when they're looking at the data and they see the big picture, what is their response process? Even better, ask for a specific example. When things went wrong, give me an example of what did you all do and how did it fix things for everybody? What are they doing to prevent security breaches? What kind of steps are in place? You know, a simple example of something is, we talked about encryption earlier. Is that encryption all the way down in the data center at the drives in place? Are the drives themselves encrypted? Simple things like that. We want to know more of that detail, not because you're the expert, but because by asking all of this, you can begin to see how real it is. How often are they releasing security updates? It should be on a fairly regular basis. It should not be, oh, we do it once a year. Should not even be, we do it once a quarter. It should be maybe once a month, if not weekly. But get an idea of what kind of security services they're actually offering here and what their reaction time is. Ask about penetration testing. Do they have a red team? Do they do it at all? Is it internal and external? How often do they do it? What do they go after? Do they go after just, oh, hey, look, we're going to go after the user interface? Do we go after the data centers? Do we go after the clients? What exactly is this penetration testing and what's the scope of it? And then ask, once again, for external audits. The certifications and security standards we were talking about earlier require external audits. They require a third party to come in and evaluate the security. You should be able to get access to that documentation before signing a contract. If you're in specific industries, look for certifications in your industry and ask them about that. But also check, make sure that they're continually keeping this up to date. It's great if they have a SOC 2 certification, but it's from 2016. That's not that great. So see how recent it is and see what their plans are for the next one. When are they going to get the next update and the next audit is done? Make sure that they're doing this continuously. So that's a lot of questions. We've gone through a huge amount of information. We've gone through what the cost is and what the likelihood, and we've seen that there's a 1 in 4 chance that you could be hit with a business-ending event. You could have to pay out $4 to $8 million in real cash on things ranging from fines to lawsuits, to remediation, to even lost future business. We've seen how we can build real security, that security is not static. It's not something that you just put up and forget about. It requires observation. It requires maintenance. It requires effort. And cloud can provide this because you're buying an as-a-service methodology. You're paying monthly. You should be getting monthly service back, and security should be part of that. Once again, this isn't something you should pay more for an add-on. This is table stakes for any cloud service. They need to be offering the security as a service. If they're not, then you should run away fast. And we've seen what makes it up. We've talked about such things as a dedicated security team, quick reaction times, penetration testing, published security standards, and certifications. And we've talked about how to identify that and what kind of questions. Part of this, Rebecca mentioned, we'll send out the recording if you're registered. We can also send a PDF copy of this document out so that you can have the list of long questions I got. So that's really it. That's how to get good security in a nutshell. We've gone through a heck of a lot. Are there any questions out there? I want to spend a few minutes asking questions.